Hello everyone, my dear friends. It's me again, Igor Pogodin. You're on my channel, and today we're going to talk about the syndrome of postponed life. I'm sure you're familiar with situations in life when you keep putting off the best things for later. It's like in that joke, although it's not really a joke, but actually the reality of my childhood. In my childhood, in the 80s and early 90s, bananas were a rarity, at least in the small town where I come from. So when bananas were thrown out, that was actually the term used in the Soviet Union. It caught on. When bananas were put on sale, a huge line would form. People would buy several kilograms of green bananas at once. They were delivered green. After that, they would usually be placed somewhere dark and covered with something so they could ripen. And there, basically, they would all ripen at the same time. And then people would eat them. And after a very short time, it would turn out that some of the bananas were already starting to rot a little. And of course, those bananas came at such a high price. It's hard to imagine now. Bananas are everywhere. But back then, they were really a rarity, at least in that small town of Vitebsk, where I come from. I don't know how it was in other cities. And people tried to eat the ones that were starting to rot so they wouldn't go bad. And tomorrow we'll eat the ones that are still good, the ones that still have some shelf life left. But by tomorrow, the ones that were more or less okay today would have started to rot. And so it turned out that every day we were eating rotten bananas. That's pretty much how things work in our lives too. That is, we're always putting things off until later. And this is an important thing. So here's the question. In this video, I want to help you understand what's behind this syndrome of postponed life and how to reclaim it and how to learn to start living today. And first, what I'd like to start with. Yes, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because there's a lot of interesting content here. And you'll be the first to know about any news on the channel. And you'll also be the very first to hear about the most interesting videos. So friends, what is actually happening with our lives? At some point you start to realize that you're already, say, 40, for example, and you haven't really lived at all. It's as if all this time you were just preparing to live. Well, you think just like our grandmothers, great-grandmothers or great-grandfathers, when they were building a bright future in the Soviet Union, they all lived with that same mindset. Right now, we'll work hard, pull ourselves together, and then, bam, we'll really start living. That was more or less the phrase. If you remember, those of you who are my age probably recall that phrase, more or less. Then we'll really live. And this then we'll really live, strangely enough, remains inside even people who had nothing to do with the Soviet era, as if this phrase somehow stuck with them. There's really nothing left to fight against anymore, and there's no need to build a bright future anymore. But it's as if we're always putting things off, postponing them for later. For example, I'm strangely wired. In fact, when I met my, second wife, she was always surprised by this trait of mine. I'm 51, and by the time this comes out, I'll definitely be 51 years old. And when we went to the store and bought me new clothes, I would just put them on the shelf and keep wearing my old clothes all the time. And Katya would say, how can you keep wearing your old clothes all the time? You just bought something new, put it on right away. Somehow she always managed to do that immediately. But I, on the other hand, would usually leave all my new clothes. Sometimes when I started making money, these were actually really expensive clothes at some point. I just wouldn't wear them. I guess it's kind of the same as with those bananas. And there are some things I probably never even wore, not once. To me, all of this seems to stem from a kind of hunger inside. A hunger, for life. A hunger, because I call it a sense of lack that comes from realizing that what you have today might not be there tomorrow. But we end up drawing a very strange conclusion that we need to save up so that something good might happen to us later. And then people who notice this, some by the time they're 20, thank God, some by 25, 30, or even 50, depending on their luck, they suddenly feel a kind of protest. Damn, I haven't really lived at all. I need to actually live. And other people tell me, come on, go ahead and live for yourself. And this go ahead and live for yourself usually comes out in phrases like, put on your best dress, meaning you deserve more, You can take time for yourself now. You don't have to wait until retirement. And strangely, we might put on our best dress, maybe even buy a nice car, but happiness still doesn't come. Why? Aren't we already living for ourselves? Maybe your children have already grown up. So you and your husband or wife have finally decided to live for yourselves. You even bought a little house, but there's still no joy. Why? Because you can't replace life with surrogates of life. You can't replace life with symbols of life. You can't replace life with simulacra of life. Do you understand? It's impossible. It's not about the dress. It's about where you are right now. Why do we postpone things? Let's take a step back. Why do we put off living until tomorrow? Not because you are saving money, as my words might have suggested just now, Dan. Not because you are used to living in a certain kind of poverty, material, psychological, or otherwise. No. But because you are afraid. You are afraid of your own life. You don't even have the strength to be interested. You lack the courage to take an interest in it because you are afraid. Why? Because life is unpredictable. Because life is exactly that very sequence of events that you cannot control in any way, that still happens, and with which you try to somehow fight and struggle. You are like a sailboat at sea caught in a storm, trying to resist it and go against the storm. In the end, the sails tear, the whole boat breaks apart, and everyone drowns. Well, you're a hero. But in reality, you're a coward. You're just afraid. You're just afraid to surrender. You're just afraid to give yourself over to the current of life, which is you, so there's nothing to be afraid of. Surrender to yourself. Surrender to yourself. But we're afraid because we're used to controlling everything. Because we're used to thinking that if we predict and expect something from reality and it happens just as we predicted, we can finally breathe a sigh of relief. And if not, we get upset, feel pain, fear, humiliation, shame, guilt, and we fight until we win, but in the end, we lose. And then a fear of life's unpredictability arises. When this fear of unpredictability appears, we start creating concepts that make life seem more or less predictable. That's a lie. Life will never be predictable. But we try to make it predictable within our minds to ease our fear a little. As a result, we put our lives on pause. We don't live. We don't breathe the air in the present moment. We don't enjoy looking into the eyes of a loved one right now. We don't savor the feeling of our bodies when we wake up in bed in the morning. We don't enjoy delicious drinks or food when we go to a restaurant. We're not present where we live because we're afraid, because we don't know what will happen next. Because of this, we strive. We try to laminate our lives. If something great happens in it, we think, okay, let it always be this way. And if not, we try to fix it and make it the way it should be so that it will always be just right. As a result, we're busy today fighting through life, and we have no time to actually live. And when we discover this suffering inside that we're not really living, we try to compensate in the only way we know how. And he is miserable in himself. Well, you can put on that dress, but it might not bring anything to life within you. Could it bring something to life? Well, that's up to chance. The dress itself doesn't bring you to life. If you thought about it, saved up, and finally bought a car, but there's no happiness. Or as my colleague used to say, you know what? She said, I figured out why you buy an apartment on credit. For the last, she said, 15 years, this was from the 2000s. The conversation probably took place maybe from 1995 to 2008, right up until that severe financial crisis. She said, every year, or well, every 2 years, when I thought about buying an apartment, I always had enough for a third of a one-bedroom. Just a third of a one-bedroom. 10 years ago it cost one amount, 5 years ago another, and today yet another. But it was always just enough for a third of a one-bedroom. So people try. They try to compensate for their fear, but you can't compensate for it outwardly. It's not about what dress you wear. It's not about the car you buy. She bought an apartment, but the joy didn't come. Why? Because what matters is what happens to you in every moment of your life, not just when you add extra stimuli. These peak experiences create the illusion that we are alive. But no, they don't add any real life. Life is in simple things. Life is in sadness. Life is in pain. Life is even in fear. There's a lot of life there, but we throw it out of our lives. We think we need to add something special so that we can finally say, now we're really living. But no, life is in simple things. A cup of coffee, the eyes of a loved one, the pain of loss, the pain of parting with someone you love. That's where life is. There is life even in grieving. There is life even in intense fear. There is life even in feeling hurt by someone else. Just be present in it. Be present where you are, not where you think you should be or ought to be. Life is richer than our plans. You won't be able to control it no matter what you think. So isn't it easier today to surrender to what is, to simple things? And maybe today, those things might even be dramatic. Surrender to everything that is. Allow things to be. No one has ever made a single mistake. You are not capable of making a mistake. This is the arrogant idea of a frightened little pathetic ego. That I can control something. That I could have done things differently. That I could have foreseen this event. You couldn't have foreseen anything. The freedom you have, including the freedom of choice, is conscious necessity. Do you remember this phrase from Spinoza? There is a big difference between the arrogant notion of conceptual freedom, I am the master of my own fate, I decide what to do, and the wise acceptance of freedom as conscious necessity. I am where I am, and that's wonderful. What happens, happens, and that's good. Remember what the Lord said in the book of Genesis when he created his wonders each day. He looked at all of it, each of the 6 days. And on the 7th he rested, remember. And he said, and it is good. Do you understand? That's how it is. Replace it is good with that's how it is. That's how it is. And then there will be space for life. Will you buy a dress? Excellent. Rejoice. You'll be flying business class or on private jets. Super. But that's not life. Inside business class, just like in economy class, there is life, just as there is inside. People who have never left the island. I lived in Bali for 2 years with my family. In Bali, there are a lot of people who, throughout their entire lives, at 45, 50, 55 years old, have never left the island, have never even flown to Java, Jakarta, or never flown to Sumbawa, never traveled to Komodo. They've never even been to Gili, an island that's just 10 kilometers away. They've heard something about Gili, but they've never been there. And life exists everywhere. There are people who have never left their own village in Bali. They grew up in that village. Maybe they went to Denpasar just once when they needed to get some documents. That's it. It doesn't get in the way of living, not even once. And here we are, trying to fly here and there, to fill ourselves with experiences, and we're not really living. Do you understand what I mean? Appreciate the simple things. How are you living right now? Ask yourself this question right now. Stop. Don't rush. How are you living right now? And how do you know that? How do you know that you are alive right now? How? Notice yourself. Listen to yourself. How do you know that you are present? How do you know that you are living? What is happening to you at this moment? How are you responding? If you feel that you are present in this moment, ask yourself, do you want to be somewhere else right now? Most likely no. If you are truly present at any point, even right now, you don't want to be anywhere else. Because life exists only here. Any fantasies about tomorrow are just conceptual fantasies. The curse of the future is that it will never come. There will only ever be the total now. Neither the past nor the future is ever given to you as an experience. You will never experience the past, you will never experience the future. You can only experience the present. Why? Because neither the past nor the future exists. Do you understand? We made them up. We made them up to exile our lives. Only for that reason. There are no other motives. Why not start being present right now? Pause this video and ask yourself, okay, wait, Masha, where am I right now? What is happening to me right now? How do I know that I am alive? How do I know that I am present? What is being born within me right now? What am I following? Do I notice my breathing? And how do I notice it? How do I respond? And how do I respond to ego's words? What is happening inside me? What new things do I notice? How do I relate to this? Am I living right now? And how do I know? You are life itself. You cannot not live. Within your conceptual hallucinations, you have built a kind of grid in which you decided that life will happen sometime in the future. But that's not true. That exists only within your hallucination. Life is here now, only now. So you have a choice to either continue sleeping in a hallucinatory conceptual dream about the past and future, or wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Welcome home. See you, my dear ones, in new videos. Bye.